What if Princess Diana could have been saved if she got to the hospital faster? When the terrible news of Princess Diana's death came out on August 30th, 1997, the whole was in shock. The doctor who tried to save Diana's life has finally spoken out after years of silence, and what he said shocked everyone. As news came in from the Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital, all eyes were on the medical staff, which was led by surgeon Dr. Monsef Dahman. Many people came up with crazy ideas about what happened, and soon the doctors who had worked so hard to save her were unfairly blamed. The question, could they have done more, has been asked for years. Before we get into what he said about that terrible night, let's go back and remember how it all started. Diana and her friend Dodi Al-Fayed were on a boat in the beautiful French and Italian Riviera on what seemed like a normal summer day. No one could have thought that what began as a quiet vacation would quickly turn into something terrible. The private jet that Princess Diana and Dodi Al-Fayed were on landed at Paris's Le Bourget airport on August 30th, 1997. They were only in the City of Lights for a short time before moving on to London. Their plan? Spent the night at the fancy Hotel Ritz Paris, which was owned by Dodi's dad, Mohammed Al-Fayed. This place was not only fancy, but it was also close to Mohammed's flat, making it easy to get away from the constant paparazzi. The hotel staff came up with a plan to get around the persistent photographers. They would send out a fake car from the Ritz's main door to hide the real one. Diana and Dodi would sneak out of the house through a back door in the meantime. At 12:20 a.m., they got into a black 1994 Mercedes-Benz S280 in secret, hoping for a smooth, quiet ride. But they didn't know that things would soon go badly on this car ride. They set out with Trevor Rees-Jones in the front and Henry Paul, who is the deputy head of security at the Ritz, behind the wheel. One small thing that would later turn out to be very important was that none of them were wearing seat belts. The plan was easy: stay out of the way of the cameras and don't make a fuss. The tour went by the lovely Place de la Concorde and along the Seine River. It was very quiet at night, but all of a sudden, things changed. At 12:23 a.m., just 3 minutes later, as they went into the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, something terrible happened. Then, though, something strange happened. Henri Paul lost control of the car and swerved all over the place to avoid a strange white Fiat. The Mercedes turned quickly and hit the 13th pillar of the tunnel head-on at 65 mph, which is over twice the speed limit and very dangerous. It had a terrible effect. Lost control of the car, it hit the stone wall of the tunnel and came to a terrible stop. The front of the car was a mess, and the fact that there were no guardrails made things even worse. This led to chaos. Early witnesses said they saw strange scenes of smoke rising from the wrecks. The paparazzi who were following them quickly arrived at the scene before emergency services could even arrive. What to do in an emergency? Princess Diana miraculously lived through the first crash in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, which set off a mad dash to save her life. The next few seconds were a mix of chaos and order as everyone there started to understand how bad things were. In the dark tunnel, among the wreckage of the black Mercedes, an unlikely hero stepped up. Dr. Frédéric Mallier, a doctor who wasn't on duty but was passing by. He was the first person to offer Diana help. Even though she didn't seem hurt, she was in shock and barely aware. She kept saying, "Oh my God," and begged, "Leave me alone," in a soft voice. The scene looked like it was from a movie. There were flashing lights from both cameras and emergency cars, and it was a quiet night in Paris. People often think of the paparazzi as bad because they are always trying to get the perfect shot. At the scene, they responded in different ways. Some people, being more caring, rushed in to help and tried to open the bent car doors. But some people, who were caught up in the chaos, kept taking pictures, which later made shocked onlookers angry and even led to some physical fights. After the crash, police and firefighters came around 12:30 a.m. amidst all the chaos. The cops started setting up the scene right away, and soon after, an ambulance arrived. Things were tense inside the ambulance. Diana was put to sleep after a short period of anxiety, during which she tried to take out her IV. While they were moving her, she suddenly went into cardiac arrest. The medical staff worked very hard and were able to start her heart beating again with CPR. Diana was finally freed from the wreckage at 1:18 a.m. The ambulance left for the Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital at 1:41 a.m. and arrived at 2:06 a.m. When they got to the hospital, the medical staff had a huge problem. Diana had serious internal injuries, like a heart that was out of place, and her chest and arm were badly hurt. It was a tough fight, even for the most skilled doctors. Even though they did everything they could, like massaging Diana's heart, her situation got worse. Sadly, she died at 4 a.m. after a fight to save her that was full of false hopes and devastating defeats. At 6 a.m., there was a news gathering where her death was announced. It was a heartbreaking event that shocked people all over the world. Everyone was sad about the death of such a well-liked person. Late that same day, both the French Prime Minister and the Interior Minister paid their respects at the hospital. Soon after, Prince Charles and Diana's sisters arrived in Paris, starting a time of sadness around the world for a famous person. When they went to the hospital with President Jacques Chirac, they were both very sad and thankful for the doctors who worked so hard to save Diana. Her body was brought back to the UK in a very sad way, with all the respect and sadness it earned. The Royal Standard was used to carefully move her body from RAF Northolt to the Hammersmith and Fulham morgue. But that crash did more than just kill someone. It led to a lot of questions and probes. That will be a big deal to talk about later. French police looked for every sign, like a strange white Fiat Uno that was seen in the crash, but they could never figure out who drove it. French investigators finally found that the driver, Henry Paul, was mostly to blame for the accident because he was going too fast and was drunk. His drug and alcohol levels were checked, which led to more rumors about his state that night. Some people, like Robin Cook, the British Foreign Secretary, and Diana's brother, Earl Spencer, said that the tragedy was caused by the cameras. This brought attention to the bigger problem of privacy invasions and media intrusions. Even so, none of the shooters were charged, even though they were accused. You may be wondering how the royal family dealt with everything after Diana's death. A lot of people didn't like what they saw because the whole world was watching. People thought the royal family's answer was a bit stiff, even cold. At Balmoral, Queen Elizabeth II was with Prince Philip and her grandsons, William and Harry. She chose to keep the boys out of the public eye. Some saw this as a grandma protecting her grieving grandchildren, but many people thought the royals were being rude by not recognizing the country's sadness. It was hard for them to balance what the people wanted with their own pain, and not everyone was happy with how they did it. Charles, Diana's ex-husband, had to tell their boys, who were only 15 and 12 years old at the time, the terrible news. Charles took on his role as both guardian and comforter for his boys, even though royal duties usually come first. He did this to show that beneath the titles, they were just a family dealing with a painful loss. As word got out that Diana had died, people who were sad left a lot of flowers and other memories outside of Kensington Palace, But while everyone else was sad, the royal family's silence was shocking. It wasn't until 5 days later that the Queen came back to London from Balmoral and gave a live speech to the whole country. In her words, she admitted how sad she was and called Diana a remarkable person. She said that she admired Diana's drive and desire to help others, and she hoped that everyone could respect her life, even though it was cut short. Someone brought up the idea of Diana's funeral being open to the public. Diana had won the hearts of the country as the people's princess, but she wasn't close to the royal family. At the end of the day, a public event was chosen to show how important she was to many people. The royal family held a grand service for her at Westminster Abbey on September 6, 1997. A lot of people were very sad. A lot of famous people, like US First Lady Hillary Clinton and Elton John, played a touching new version of Candle in the Wind that was written in Diana's honor. The cheers that broke out after Diana's brother, Earl Spencer, gave a touching and sometimes sharp tribute were one of the most memorable parts of the day. He spoke badly about the press and the royal family for how they had treated Diana in a sneaky way. This change from the usual seriousness of royal funerals brought out how difficult Diana's relationship was with the group she used to be a part of. After the service, Diana was buried in a private ceremony at Althorpe, the home of her family. Her final resting place, which was on an island in the estate's lovely pleasure garden, seemed to represent both her separation from the royal family and her link to her family history, the theories of conspiracy. Of course, the sad death of Princess Diana led to a lot of conspiracy theories. People put together different parts of the story to make a web of suspicion and mystery. Numerous of these ideas are based on Dodi Al-Fayed, who was Diana's father and died with her. His belief that the two were killed on purpose by the British elite has not changed. Mohammed has long said that important people in Britain couldn't stand the thought of Diana marrying his son, who was an Egyptian Muslim. This sounds like something out of a thriller. He said that this connection was seen as a threat to the purity of the monarchy, and that those in power planned for them to be killed because of it. Mohammed's claims have kept the theory fires going, making sure that people are still arguing passionately about what happened that terrible night. There are even people who blame the medical staff who tried to save Diana, which makes the fire even hotter. They give a dramatic account of what happened, saying that Diana wasn't killed in the crash, but was killed on purpose at the hospital. These ideas usually center on the claimed delays in getting her to the hospital and the medical procedures she underwent, saying that they were all part of a sinister British plan to kill her. Dr. Monsef Dahman, who led the team at Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital that fought to save her life, is the most important person in this idea. Some people who believe in conspiracies think that Diana's late arrival at the hospital wasn't just a mistake, but part of a planned attack. They said that the delay was meant to make her situation worse, so that it would be easier for the medical team, who were supposedly acting on orders from British intelligence, to make sure she wouldn't make it. Some of them even say that the doctors gave her the wrong treatments on purpose to kill her faster. But the doctor who tried to save her, Dr. Monsef Dahman, has strongly denied these statements. He tells everyone that he and his team did everything they could to help Diana, and he's talked about how her death made him feel. That night, that wasn't about some evil plan for Dr. Dahman. It was about doing everything he could to save a life. He thinks that the conspiracy theories change the truth and don't honor the hard work and commitment of the medical staff. The investigation into Operation Paget. There were a lot of rumors and crazy ideas that led to Operation Paget, a huge investigation by the British Metropolitan Police led by Lord John Stevens. It began in 2004 with the goal of figuring out how Princess Diana died and putting an end to all the many conspiracy theories. No stone was left unturned during Operation Pagi. The team had two main objectives. First, to learn as much as possible about the crash, and second, to look closely at Diana's medical care. A lot of the ideas said that the crash wasn't just a bad accident, but something that was planned ahead of time to be bad. Many people pointed the finger at the royal family and the British Secret Services. Some said MI6 planned Diana's death with direct orders from the royal family. Dodi Al-Fayed, who was the father of Dodi Al-Fayed and also tragically died in the crash, gave this whole conspiracy idea a lot of support. According to Mohammed, there was definitely foul play going on. His public accusations and legal battles kept these ideas alive in the media, which led to an official reaction. That answer came in the form of Operation Pagi, which looked everywhere. As part of their study, the team talked to important witnesses, experts in different fields, and went over every detail of Diana's care that night. They hired top forensic experts, like doctors and accident investigators, to look over all the evidence and figure out what went so horribly wrong. The cameras were something that the team really paid attention to. Many people thought that the fact that they kept chasing Diana's car was a big reason why the accident happened. Because of this, the probe looked into how the constant pressure from the media on Diana might have led to the crash. A lot of attention was also paid to the medical care Diana got right after the crash. Some people who believe in conspiracy said that her care was delayed on purpose, but Operation Pagi found no proof of this. It turned out that the French emergency team was just doing what they always do. They stabilized Diana at the scene of the crime. This is called stay and play, before rushing her to the hospital. This plan was meant to give her the best chance of living, even though she was badly hurt. After 3 years of research, the team finally put together a huge 832-page study that explained everything they had found. What did they come to? When looked at more closely, the conspiracy ideas just didn't make sense. To make things clear, a big study said the crash was an awful accident, not part of a secret plan. It put all the blame on Henri Paul, the driver, who was drunk, and the reporters who were following Diana's car. In 2008, a coroner's inquest agreed with this and said that Diana and Dodi's deaths were unlawful killing because the driver was drunk and the reporters were too aggressive. Diana wasn't wearing a seatbelt, which made her injuries worse, the inquiry also said. Let us now talk about Dr. Monsef, the doctor who worked so hard to save Princess Diana. We talked about him before when we were talking about conspiracy ideas. Then he finally spoke out, telling the Daily Mail his side of the story. He said that the night at the emergency room started out like any other until something very strange happened. She was badly hurt in the car accident and was rushed in around 2 a.m. Right away, Dr. Monsef and his team knew they were facing a big problem. Diana had already had a heart attack, and the rescuers were working hard to get her stable before taking her to the hospital. The doctors got right to work as soon as Princess Diana arrived at the hospital. A lot of x-rays were taken, and the readings were not good. Diana's left pulmonary vein was torn badly, and she was bleeding inside. This is a tough and dangerous injury. Dr. Monsef knew how bad it was, so he chose to do a thoracotomy, which means he opened up her chest to try to fix the problem. He found a tear in the pericardium, the sac that protects the heart, during this high-pressure surgery. This was an even bigger problem. Her chest was filled with blood because of the tear. This put a lot of stress on her heart and made it hard for it to pump properly. Because he knew the case was too complicated to handle by himself, Dr. Monsef called for help. Professor Alain Pavy, a famous French heart surgeon, arrived at the scene around 2:30 a.m. He took over and moved Diana to a different operating room for more complicated surgery. This gave everyone a spark of hope. Dr. Monsef, his team, and Professor Pavy did everything they could, but Diana's injuries were just too bad. The events of that night changed Dr. Monsef in a way that he didn't talk about for over 20 years. Dr. Monsef Dahman recently broke his silence and told new things about the crazy night Princess Diana died. There are reports that Prince Charles could be arrested in connection with Diana's death, which adds another twist to the story. It would be big news in the UK and around the world if these stories turned out to be true. People have been saying for a while that Prince Charles might have had a reason to be a part of a plan against Diana. He may have wanted to marry Camilla Parker Bowles, and Diana was seen as getting in the way of that. There have been rumors that Charles may have removed Diana to make room for his romance with Camilla. Going back to what Dr. Monsef Dahman recently said, he gave an amazing account of what happened that night. Diana was in very bad shape when she was rushed into the operating room because she was bleeding very badly inside. The well-known Professor Allen was part of Dr. Monsef's team, and they acted quickly to find the source of A big tear was quickly found in Diana's upper left pulmonary vein, which is a very important blood vessel. This kind of injury was very bad, and it made the operations harder. Professor Allen led the way and worked carefully to fix the torn vein. Dr. Monsef said that the operation room was tense and focused, and that everyone there knew how important every second was. Diana's torn vein had to be fixed right away if she was going to be saved. Even though they used the best methods and were very exact, the situation was very tough. Diana's heart had stopped, mostly because she had been hurt so badly and lost so much blood. Now that the line was fixed, the doctors had to do something even harder: bring Diana back to life. Dr. Monsef Dahman talked about the hard work that came next. The team did every possible thing to get her heart beating again, such as manual cardiac massage, where they pumped the heart by hand, and multiple defibrillation tries, which usually worked but didn't this time. For an hour, the room was filled with doctors' determined faces, pressing orders, and the beeping of monitors. Dr. Monsef gave Diana a lot of different medicines to try to get her heart beating again and keep her situation stable. It became clear that their work might not be enough as time went on. At 4:06 a.m., when all other options had been exhausted, the team made the heartbreaking choice to stop trying to save the life. Dr. Monsef and his co-workers were very sad when they learned that Princess Diana had died. No matter how they felt, the moment was a crushing loss for everyone who had given their all to save a woman who was loved by many people around the world. After a night that was both public and deeply personal, the team had to deal with the fallout. They were upset and overwhelmed, knowing that they had fought not only for a patient, but for a worldwide figure, made Dr. Monsef think about how deeply the event had affected them emotionally. That operating room and the whole world were changed by Princess Diana's death in a big way. When Dr. Monsef thought about that terrible night, he felt a deep sense of duty and was very aware that their work was being watched around the world. He was sure they did everything they could to save her, even though the end result was terrible. So what do you think about Dr. Monsef's point of view?